5 sinister and spine-chilling motel stories exposed, unexplained horrors that haunt forever. The air was thick, heavy with secrets and the musty scent of mildew, as Sarah stepped into the silver lining motel, clutching her children close. Lucy beamed, too much innocence radiating from her small frame, but Tommy clung to her leg, eyes wide with unshed tears. Outside, the flickering neon sign buzzed ominously, casting unsettling shadows like phantoms dancing just out of reach. She could feel it, the weight of something sinister pressing down, and even as she tried to shake off the dread, it wrapped around her like a tightening vice. They were no longer safe. Mr. Reynolds, the motel owner, welcomed them with a much too bright smile, but something in his gaze made her skin crawl. He leaned in closer, a little too interested in Lucy and Tommy, and Sarah felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Fading memories flashed in her mind. The last time she felt this enthralled, it was suffocated by fear, her heart thrumming with the haunting rhythm of dread. A chill slithered through her as they made their way to the room, the wallpaper peeling and ghostly whispers echoing in her mind. Later, when darkness enveloped them, the children were finally asleep, but Sarah's eyelids felt heavy with more than just fatigue. As she drifted, whispers danced around her, serpentine shadows flaring and retreating in her tired mind. "Mommy!" A sharp gasp tore through the silence, and she bolted upright. Tremors coursed through her limbs. Lucy and Tommy still sleeping, blissfully unaware of the terror coiling around them. She glanced at the bathroom mirror, fingers trembling as daylight crept through the window, illuminating strange symbols etched into the glass. Every corner of the room seemed to vibrate with an unseen menace. Time failed to progress in the silver lining. Sarah's pulse quickened as an icy draft crept through the cracks, brushing against her like ghostly fingers. "Just the wind," she whispered, trying to convince herself. But the feeling wouldn't let go. A fleeting shadow darted in her periphery, and fear lodged itself in her throat, thick and suffocating. The next morning, Sarah found herself in a surreal conversation with Martha, the local neighbor. She arrived with baked goods and warm words but delivered a chilling warning: "You oughta be careful here. Bad things happen at the silver lining." The hairs on Sarah's arms stood on end. A heart-stopping moment gripped her, realizing the turmoil around her wasn't just a figment of her imagination. Something darker lurked beneath the surface. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Just as she processed Martha's words, Mr. Reynolds entered the scene. The warmth he once exuded transformed into an oppressive weight. She felt trapped, the walls closing in like a vice, her instincts screaming to flee. Last night's horrors piled in her mind, and now, as his eyes zeroed in on her, she sensed a malevolence draping over him, suffocating and looming. In that heartbeat of resolution, she turned to the children, ready to escape this trap only to find them gone. His voice, now a distorted whisper, echoed around her. "Where are they, Sarah?" She lunged for the door, heart-pounding darkness encroaching, and she felt them slipping away into the shadows. The motel breathed around her, and suddenly she was holding on to nothing as fear rendered her powerless. The pull of a legacy, dark and unyielding, beckoned her deeper into its tangled web. Would she find Lucy and Tommy before the walls swallowed them whole? As the very fabric of her reality began to unravel, one haunting thought remained: was it already too late? Panic surged through Sarah as she flung open the door, the cold air gushing against her skin. "Lucy! Tommy!" She shouted, but only silence answered. The hallway loomed before her, dimly lit and unchecked shadows playing tricks on her eyes. It was like stepping into a sepulchral mist, where each click of her shoes echoed eerily, swallowed by the oppressive stillness. A feeling of being watched prickled at her skin. Sarah glanced back into the room, the door yawning open like a gaping maw, inviting her to retreat into its familiarity. But her children were out there, lost somewhere in this nefarious labyrinth. Her heart thundered as she stepped into the corridor, its walls sagging inward, as if they too wished to close in on her. "Where are you?" she whispered, a prayer and a plea intertwined. She didn't know whether to run to the staircase at the end of the hall or recoil back into the room. Each option felt wrought with peril. What if Mr. Reynolds was already lurking, waiting to ensnare her in his web of dread? As if summoned by her thoughts, he materialized at the far end of the corridor, his silhouette towering in the faint glow of a dying light bulb. He was blocking her path, the unnaturally wide grin stretching across his face seemed to stretch into darkness itself. The shadows danced around him, pulsating and shifting as if alive. "Looking for someone?" he crooned, voice slithering like a serpent through the air. "No." She turned on her heel, sprinting back to the room. Fear gripped her like a vice, squeezing until she gasped for breath. Each step felt like running through molasses, the walls whispered her name, drawing her back in. Hands shaking, she slammed the door behind her, locking it with trembling fingers. The room was static, the usual clutter and familiarity morphing into a battlefield steeped in terror. Shadows gathered in corners, the light struggling to illuminate the alleys where dark thoughts prowled. Her heart raced, and she felt the fissures of sanity cracking. "Mommy," the soft sound broke her concentration, a mere whisper threading its way through the tension, like a ghostly sigh. Lucy's voice trailed from the bathroom, the door ajar, revealing a sliver of darkness within. "Lucy?" Panic swelled as she moved towards it, dread pooling in her stomach. Stealing her breath, she nudged the door open. The bathroom was empty, save for the strange symbols that now glowed faintly on the mirror, each one pulsating like a heartbeat, drawing her closer. The air thickened. "Where are you?" she pleaded. Beneath her, the floor creaked. It sounded like a whisper, a soft beckoning. "Come to us," she stumbled back, eyes darting to the window. Outside, the neon lights blinked ominously, carting shadows across the room where they flickered, undulating like restless spirits. And then, from behind her, she felt a chill, a breath of cold that whispered senseless secrets. It skittered past her, a movement that barely registered, but her heart saw it, felt it before her mind could catch up. She turned slowly, dread pooling at the base of her spine. In that moment, the bathroom door slammed shut with a resounding thud. Her breath caught in her throat. "Mommy!" Lucy screamed from behind that door, the sound painful and raw. Panic clawed at Sarah as she sprinted back, reaching for the doorknob. It shuddered under her touch, locked. "Lucy!" she cried out, fear lacing her voice. "Let me out! Let me out!" Tommy's small voice chimed in, crying through the cracks with terror. "Please, hold on." She pulled at the doorknob, it wouldn't budge. Her heart raced faster, and the shadows around her grew bolder, pushing her toward the edges of sanity. The air turned stifling, acrid and thick, an invisible hand gripping her throat. "Sarah!" Mr. Reynolds' voice came from the darkness, sickly sweet. "You can't leave. They're already part of us." She clutched her chest, choking back a scream. Would she ever see her children again? The walls whispered her fate, laced with a desolate promise. Was this the end of her struggle? In the midst of her despair, a thought buried in hope flickered through her mind. There might be a way to break the binding spell of the motel if she could only uncover the truth behind those symbols. But time was running out, with every second sealing her family deeper into whatever malevolence lurked within. "Hold on, I'll find a way," she shouted, determination igniting the fire within her. But with every heartbeat, it was as though the silver lining was tightening its grip, threatening to swallow them all. In that harrowing moment, Sarah made her choice, to fight against the encroaching darkness. The pieces of the puzzle were all around her, and she had to unravel them before that insatiable malevolence claimed her kids forever. As she sprinted towards the symbols on the mirror, a deafening silence fell over the room. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, but she pressed forward. She had to confront whatever horror awaited her in the dark recesses of the silver lining. What waiting secrets would emerge, lurking just beyond the veil of her sanity? Would she uncover the truth before it was too late? The symbols pulsed, each throb sending unsettling vibrations through Sarah's core. Closer now, she could see the shapes more clearly, their intricate designs almost alive, writhing and swirling under the dim light like a nest of serpents. She felt the air thicken, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears, a relentless drum of dread. Lucy. Tommy. She pressed on, her voice rasping as she stalked toward the mirror. The glossy surface reflected a distorted version of her eyes, wide and frantic, shadows clawing at her edges. She hesitated, the room trembling as if anticipating her next move. The whispers grew louder, mingling with the distant cries of her children, ghostly and hoarse. "Come to us, join us." Sarah's gut twisted. She reached out, fingers trembling as they brushed against the mirror's surface. A jolt shot through her, the sensation like ice slicing into her skin. In that instant, the world shifted. Images raced past her mind like a film, blurred visions of sadness, despair, and chaotic nights of laughter that were now twisted into terror. She recoiled as if burned. "Stop it. Leave me alone." She screamed, but the images clawed at her resolve, pulling her deeper into their chaotic embrace. A figure materialized within, a face she recognized all too well, eyes wide with fear. It was Lucy, pleading for help, trapped within the glassy confines, her innocence twisted into a cry of desperation. The reality twisted further as shadows poured from the walls. They thickened, reaching for her with spindly fingers, groping her mind, trying to draw her into their depths. "Join them, Sarah." The voice was now a chorus, moaning and sibilant, flowing around her like a stream of dread. "No. Not my children." The fire within her surged again, burning against the cold weight of darkness. She gritted her teeth and pushed back against the voices, forcing them from her mind. She had to find a way to break the spell. Her eyes darted back to the glowing symbols. Each one seemed to have a meaning, a pattern. If she could only decipher them, they might lead her to a solution. Biting her lip, she whispered the first symbol's name, Krell. Suddenly, the room pulsed, her voice resonated, the walls trembling as if shaken awake. An echo dripped from the darkness, fuzzy words whispered just out of reach. It was then she understood, these symbols were keys, unraveling secrets external and internal, revealing the innermost fears bottled tightly within. The shadows quivered like eager husks, responding to her presence with malicious enthusiasm. Mr. Reynolds' laughter boomed from somewhere deep within, a echoing bark of glee that shattered her fragile concentration. "Sarah, why fight it? They want to be with you. You have no choice," he taunted, his form materializing before her, a grotesque figure of twisted flesh and maddening delight. "Stay away!" she cried, barreling toward the mirror. Rage ignited the very fibers of her being. She recited another symbol loudly, Celadren. The air crackled, and the shadows recoiled, retreating just a fraction. A crack formed in the mirror, spiderwebbing outward as the ancient language coursed through her, empowering, anchoring her will against the torrent. For the first time, the tension around her seemed to waver, the symbols glowing brighter with each new incantation. "Darkness may envelop, but light fights," she shouted, throwing her energy into the cracks spreading in the glass. As the name of another symbol burst from her lips, the air screamed, melding agony with the electrifying pulse of raw strength. The fear in her children's voices intensified as if sensing their mother's resolve. But before she could speak again, the bathroom door behind her shuddered violently. "Mommy. We're scared." Tommy's voice pierced her heart, turning her to face him. "No. I'm not leaving you." She pushed another symbol into the fray, preparing for a third incantation when the crack in the mirror shattered. Shards exploded outward, each piece casting eerie reflections of the dancing shadows and echoing laughter that filled the claustrophobic room. Sarah's breath quickened, feeling as if the very night conspired against her. Could she hold on amidst this tempest of terror? Before she could assess the chaos surrounding her, a voice reached her at the edge of mental clarity, low and insistent. Join us, or lose them. What choice remained, and what awaited her if she subsided into their beckoning embrace? The walls pulsed again, and the shadows surged, dark figures gathering momentum around her as time ticked ominously. Would her fight for her family send them closer into darkness, or pull them back into the light? The answer lied within those haunting symbols, but the danger lurked ever closer, closing in on her, an unyielding predator locked on its prey. And then, out in the tumult, the faintest glimmer of something caught Sarah's eye. Could it be the way out, the real answer hidden in the chaos? Or was it just another trap waiting to ensnare her? The shimmering piece of glass that caught Sarah's eye felt like a beacon among the chaos. It was small, a fragment from the mirror, but its surface reflected a distant light, pulsating as if it had its own heartbeat. With desperation clawing at her throat, she lunged for it, understanding that it might hold the key to her children's salvation or her own demise. As her fingers closed around the shard, a violent shiver ripped through her entire body. Visions bombarded her, glimpses of a road at night, a family-friendly diner filled with laughter that suddenly turned to screams, a flickering neon sign lingering on the edge of sanity. And then, horror, an image of Lucy and Tommy surrounded by darkness, their faces contorted in fear. "Mommy, help!" The echo of their cries pierced her consciousness, intertwining with the symphony of shadows that danced and leered from all corners of the bathroom. They wanted to consume her, tear her apart, and drag her further into their abyss. "Not this time," she shouted, clutching the shard tightly. The pulse of the symbols flashed like lightning in her mind, and with each heartbeat, she felt the weight of their ancient knowledge pressing down on her soul. "Sevekta!" she bellowed, sending the sound slicing through the oppressive air. The shadows recoiled, a hiss escaping their ethereal forms. Each syllable shattered the dark energy, forming a barrier, pushing the tendrils back, if only for a moment. But that moment wasn't enough. She could sense it. Fear blossomed in the air, a sour tang that made her stomach churn. The shadows surged ahead, their whispers wrapping around her throat. "Mommy, help us, stay back!" she yelled, feeling their cold mist swirl closer, threatening to drown her sanity. The room spiraled, and with it, her resolve flickered like a candle in a storm. She held the shard higher, desperate for its light to guide her. It illuminated inscriptions on the walls, symbols she hadn't noticed before. Different from the earlier ones, these were unfamiliar, yet beckoned her to recite them. "Wyanath," she spoke, letting the alien syllables roll off her tongue, her heart forging ahead against the tide of despair. The energy surged once more, and the walls trembled as if in response. In an eruption, the floor began to ripple, like water breaking into 1,000 waves. The laughter faded, replaced by a deep rumble that seemed to emanate from the very core of the house, an ominous call that mirrored her children's desperation. Suddenly, a shadow formed before her, taking shape into the grotesque visage of Mr. Reynolds, his eyes gleaming with mania. "You're losing them, Sarah. They belong to me now." "No!" she shouted back, feeling the fear grip her, tightening like a noose. "I will not lose them." She thrust the shard forward, and a blinding flash erupted from its center. Blinded, she staggered, but as the light faded, she realized the shadows were no longer swarming. Instead, they screeched a cacophony of fear before folding back like a retreating tide, revealing a glimmering portal emerging where the mirror once stood. "Mommy!" came the faint voice of her children, born on that shrinking tide. The portal pulsed with iridescence, bordered by the very symbols that had tormented her. It was a passage to the unknown, a chance for freedom or a descent into greater darkness. With her heart racing, she gazed between the portal and the remnants of shadow. Would stepping through save Lucy and Tommy, or lead them to something worse than what they faced now. "Mommy, help us!" The wailing cries, now sharper, filled the room, urging her forward. Was this salvation, or was it the snare that would claim them all? The answer lay within that glowing threshold, but as she took a step toward the portal, shadows reared up again, catching her off guard. The darkness curled around her legs, pulling her back as she fought with everything she had. "No!" The symbols sparkled in defiance at her words, urging her with their vibrancy. Would she yield to the darkness, or trust the light to guide her through? Her pulse quickened. And the air around her thickened again. With one final glance at the terrible swirling shadows, she pushed herself to move forward. What awaited her on the other side? Only terror and uncertainty awaited her answer. And then, amidst the chaos, she felt it, a presence looming closer, waiting, watching. Could she truly escape the clutches of the very darkness that haunted her? Or was it already too late? The air around Sarah crackled with an electric tension. Shadows pulsed, swirling grotesquely. She couldn't look away from the portal. It shimmered like an oasis in a vast desert of despair, yet a sense of impending doom tinged the air. In that heartbeat, the room whispered promises that echoed in her mind: "Save your children, embrace the light." The wails of Lucy and Tommy reverberated deeper in her soul. They weren't just voices anymore, they were her very essence, the core of her being begging for salvation. Swallowing fear, she lunged toward the portal, heart hammering against her ribcage, and a hand thick, cold, and slender gripped her ankle. The touch sent chills racing through her veins, freezing her mid-step. The darkness was alive, sentient. A face formed in the shadows, twisting into an abominable mask of glee. It was Mr. Reynolds, but not as she had seen him before. This was a butchered version, all teeth and hollowness. "Did you think you could escape?" His voice dripped with malice, serpent-like, sibilant. "Let go!" She shouted, the shard in her hand vibrating, almost as if it could sense her fear. "Sarah!" His voice became a mocking sing-song, as if her name was a curse. "They're mine to keep, forever." The grip around her ankle tightened, pulling her down. The swirling shadows invited her into their depths, but she fought, clawing at the ground, her finger brushing against the shard's cool surface. A flash of its light sent another wave of energy surging through her. "No!" she screamed, echoing her determination, and she swung the shard like a weapon. The light exploded, and the shadows recoiled, hissing with rage and pain. As they flinched back, the scene warped around her. The portal flickered, and with it, the laughter, then fear. It split into murky, warped visions of her children, their faces now distorted, eyes wide and pleading, but painted with an underlying terror that wasn't there before. "Mommy!" They echoed in unison, the sound snapping together like brittle glass, sharp. Was it them calling? Or a trick, a cruel manipulation from the shadows? "No, no," she stammered, uncertainty clawing at her chest. If she left, how could she trust that this was the right choice? What if she was stepping into a nightmare worse than this? Just then, the air shifted again, thickening like molasses. The shadows pulled straight, tightening around her like a vice, squeezing the breath from her lungs. She stumbled back, eyes darting between the swirling mass of darkness and the glowing portal. "Say goodbye, Sarah," the grotesque form of Reynolds sneered. "Your precious children will be forgotten in the void." With every ounce of strength, she pulled the shard back and shouted another incantation, Reveille. A flash ignited, momentarily illuminating the bathroom in a brilliant white. It burned through the darkness like the sun breaking free at dawn. The shadows howled as they melted into the walls, vibrating with rage, but it wasn't enough. They were still there, clawing, gnashing, battling for her soul. The portal beckoned a shimmering promise against the darkness, but doubt lingered like a thick fog. Was it truly a path to her children, or a gateway that lured her into the eternal night? "Mommy!" The cries morphed into something darker, filled with mockery. She shuddered, feeling the shadows clutching at her being, pulling her away from everything she loved. Adrenaline surged through her, and as she stumbled, she caught sight of their familiar faces one last time. Determination burst forth. She would not let Reynolds win. She wouldn't let them claim her. Together. She yelled, thrusting herself toward the portal, the shard blazing in front of her like a sword of light, ready to pierce the looming darkness. But as she leaped, something whispered in her ear laden with secrets, heavy with dread. Do you really think they'll be saved? In that instant, she hesitated, the shadows swirling into a tempest around her. Was she really ready to trade one nightmare for another? And then, the world around her shattered like glass, revealing the undefined chaos ahead. What would be waiting for her on the other side? Sarah's leap felt surreal, as if time slowed in that moment, one foot leaving the ground while the other clung desperately to reality. The portal fizzled with a malevolent rhythm, vibrating with promises of salvation, but also with the nagging doubt that contorted inside her like a twisted vine. With a crash, she burst through the threshold, engulfed in blinding light, but it was not the soft embrace of warmth she had envisioned. Instead, it was a visceral heat that burned, as if the light was made of molten despair. For a split second, she felt weightless, her fears suspended. Then she hit the ground with a thud, rough concrete scraping against her skin. The light faded, giving way to a grim landscape, a grotesque mockery of what she hoped to find. Empty, desolate streets stretched out before her, lined with crumbling buildings. A nauseating scent of decay hung in the air, thick enough to choke on. Ghostly whispers danced through the atmosphere, crashing against her as if taunting her very existence. "Mommy!" The echo trickled down from above, drifting from rooftop to rooftop, making her head spin. They were here. Somewhere. But her heart sank as the truth settled in, this wasn't home. It wasn't safe. The shadows had followed her, morphing from horrific memories into twisted specters that drifted in and out of her peripheral vision. Lucy? Tommy? Her voice trembled, swallowed by the abyss. Each syllable felt heavy, as if the ground itself resisted her cries. She took a step, then another. Each footfall resonated, heavy with fear. The shadows pressed close, caressing her skin, whispering doubts as they moved like smoke around her. "Leave," now a voice hissed, and she whipped around. What stood before her was a figure, both familiar and foreign, a clone of Mr. Reynolds, but this one was different. The smile had fractured into a sinister grin, and blood-red eyes buried deep within its skull glowed with malicious glee. "You shouldn't have come here, Sarah. You don't own me," she shouted, the shard clutched tightly in her hand. It pulsed with energy, but even that seemed to dim beneath the overwhelming power of this realm. "Oh, but I do." His laughter erupted, crude and mocking, reverberating off the walls. "This is where your weaknesses thrive. You can never leave, not without a price." With a swift motion, he extended his hand, darkness spilling forth like a tsunami. The shadows surged toward her, and panic clenched her gut. She barely dodged, racing deeper into the labyrinth of abandoned buildings. She could feel the chill of their pursuit, creeping closer. Suddenly, she rounded a corner and collided with another figure. A woman, gaunt and hollow-eyed, stood before her. "You're not supposed to be here." The woman screeched, her face twisting in terror. "You must leave. They'll take you." "Who? Who will take me?" Sarah gasped, feeling the weight of impending doom. "There is no escape." "The children," the woman's voice broke, and her lips twisted into a silent scream. Sarah's heart hammered. "My kids, where are they?" But before the woman could answer, a shadow lunged from the darkness behind her, claws outstretched. Sarah screamed, the sound tearing through the air like a siren, but it was muffled, swallowed by the overwhelming cacophony of shadows. She stumbled back, pulse racing, eyes darting around. Where was the exit? In the chaos, the figure of Mr. Reynolds reformed, slinking in closer. You can't fight the shadows, Sarah. They know your deepest fears. As panic closed in, she felt the shard growing warmer, its luminescence flickering weakly against the penetrating dark. Maybe it held the key to her salvation, yet despair bubbled within her. What if it only made things worse? Time to choose, Sarah. The voice of Reynolds echoed again, reverberating off the cracked asphalt. The fate of your children lies within your choice. Will you save them or save yourself? The shadows hissed, drawing tighter for the kill, the phrasing hanging like a noose around her spirit. What was she willing to sacrifice to escape this nightmare? Her breath quickened. Thoughts spiraling. What if the darkness wins? And then it hit her, a question sharper than the splintered glass beneath her feet. What if it already had? The shadows pressed in, an unrelenting wave, threatening to consume her whole. Sarah stumbled backward, the heat of the obscure light behind her clashing with the cooler shadows encircle her. Every whispered doubt grew louder, wrapping around her thoughts like barbed wire. Her heart raced like a frantic drummer, each beat a reminder of her vulnerability. Suddenly, she caught a flash of movement. A small figure darted between two crumbling concrete walls, the outline of a child. Lucy! She screamed, hope igniting a fire within her chest. But the hope flickered as quickly as it came, snuffed out by the weight of fear. What if this was another trick? Ignoring the shadows threatening to swallow her whole, she charged toward the figure, desperation propelling her forward. The echo of children's laughter ricocheted off the walls, but there was an underlying distortion, a shriek that made Sarah's skin crawl. Lucy! Tommy! She called, her voice rising above the clamor. She turned a corner, adrenaline coursing through her veins, and slammed into the figure that had appeared before her. It was a girl, but she wasn't her daughter. The child had hollow cheeks and wide, unblinking eyes that reflected nothing but terror. You shouldn't have come, the girl whispered, her voice a rasping echo that seemed to come from the shadows themselves. They'll take you to where's Lucy? Where's Tommy? Panic clawed at Sarah's throat. Don't you see? The girl's lips twisted into a sorrowful smile, cracked and bleeding. They're lost now. Like the others know. Sarah's heart plummeted. She backed away, the words like cold water dousing her hope. I want to leave them. I have the shard. I can save them. Can you? The girl giggled, a sound that twisted Sarah's gut. She could feel the darkness press in, a cold breath on her neck. Time seemed to stretch as shadows reached for her, dripping with sludge and despair. Sarah turned to flee, but behind her, the echoes of children's cries warped into a haunting chorus. Mommy, mommy! She bolted down another alley, pushing against the decaying walls, the shard pulsing violently in her grip. Light spilled from it briefly, illuminating the nightmare around her. The grotesque forms of former souls flickered in and out, their faces contorted in silent screams. They reached for her with skeletal hands, but their voices were soft, pleading. Help us please. Get away from me. She yelled, attempting to dodge their grasp. Each turn of her body aligned with a wave of shadows, a terrifying dance in this hellish spectacle. Suddenly, she tripped on a loose stone and fell hard, scraping her palms against the rough ground. The shard slipped from her fingers, skidding away into the darkness. Panic soared through her like ice. No! She scrambled on her hands and knees, heart pounding, searching desperately for the glimmer of hope. A dark form loomed over her, the towering figure of Reynolds emerging from the relentless dark. His grin widened, teeth sharp and glinting. You'll regret your defiance, Sarah. You're too late to save them. They're already part of this world, part of me. No! She gasped, eyes wild. For a second, the weight of despair nearly crushed her. But then, the shard flickered in the shadows, pulsing like a heartbeat. It was there, just behind Reynolds' leg. In a reckless surge of defiance, she lunged, snatching the shard up just as darkness coiled around her. Speaking to the fragment, her voice trembled with an uncertain resolve. "You are my only chance." With an electrifying burst, the shard surged with light, pushing back against the shadows. Sarah could feel its power coursing through her, a lifeline pulling her away from the abyss. But at what cost? Shadows melted back momentarily, howling in anger, revealing paths that twisted into deeper darkness. "Do you understand the price of this power?" Reynolds sneered, stepping closer, darkness rippling around his form. "Leave me alone," she cried, looking into the shadows, searching for the faces of her children. "I will find them. I swear it." But the shadows sank back, revealing only more darkened paths. Her resolve mustered, she stood tall, clutching the shard tightly. "I choose them. I will not lose them." As the shadows recoiled, an unnatural howl of fury echoed through the cracked streets, rattling the walls around her. Time stilled in that moment, the air thick with palpable tension. She was standing at a precipice, no idea what lay ahead. The children's cries grew louder, more insistent, wrapping around her heart like a vice. Then came a whisper, ominous and haunting, "Choose wisely, Sarah." The shadows twirled closer again, ravenous and ready to pounce. Sarah felt her breath hitch, one last realization dawning upon her. What if the price was more than she could bear? In the encroaching darkness, a single question lingered: how far was she willing to go to save them? Sarah's heart hammered as the shadows pulsed closer. The intertwining blackness felt alive, hungry, and it pressed at her from all sides, wrapping around her limbs with a clammy grip. She could barely breathe. With shaky hands, she clung to the shard, its warmth a bright contrast to the chill creeping through her veins. "Lucy!" she shouted again, voice choked with desperation. Breaths came quick and shallow, echoing in the depth of the looming silence. "Tommy! I'm coming for you." But the shadows laughed deep, guttural sounds that reverberated through the alley. They mocked her cries, and with each note, the air thickened, stifling her hope until it was a mere whisper. She stumbled forward, scanning the dark for a flicker, a hint of movement. Images from just moments ago still haunted her, the girl with hollow cheeks, the empty eyes. Those words wormed their way into her mind, saturating her thoughts with dread. "They'll take you to." The thought stuck with her like a splinter. What was she walking into? A fear prickled at her nape, the sense that all of this had been orchestrated: the shadows, Reynolds, even her children's cries. They were all part of a sinister play unfolding in this haunted landscape. The shard pulsated violently in response to her turmoil, almost feeling like a living thing begging her to clarify her intent. She pressed it tightly against her chest, as if it could protect her. Ahead, a fork in the road appeared. The left path loomed heavy with shadows, while the right glimmered faintly with traces of light. Instinctively, she knew the light might offer a chance. But did she dare? What if that hope was a lie, another snare meant to lure her in deeper? The shadows danced, swaying and swirling, seemingly following her every thought. "You'll never find them," they hissed, "they belong to us now." She shook her head fiercely, brushing her fingers against her eyes, fighting back the tears. No! She couldn't let the despair creep in. With a sudden spark of clarity, she chose the right path, forcibly stepping into the wispy light. The shadows snarled, clawing at her edges, but the shard erupted in brilliant radiance, pushing them back momentarily. She pressed on, heart racing toward the unknown, trusting instinct rather than rationality. As she advanced, the sounds changed. The cries of her children sharpened, twisting into something almost feral. She gritted her teeth, mind reeling at the thought of what might lie ahead. Every step felt like a drumbeat, marching her closer to a reckoning. Then she saw a flicker of movement at the end of the corridor. A glow that pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. "No," she breathed, feeling her heart sink. It was a door, one that emitted a soft, inviting light. Perilous curiosity pulled her forward despite a twinge of fear. But the laughter grew louder, forming a chorus of taunts around her. You won't like what you find behind it, Sarah. Her breath caught again. She hesitated, heart racing at the thought of her children. What if they were behind that door? What if it was a trap? No more choices. No more indecision. She had to know. With a resolve drenched in terror, she approached the door, hand trembling as she reached for the handle. The laughter faded for just a moment, replaced by an eerie hush that filled her ears. Choose wisely, the shadows murmured as she gripped the knob. Before she could turn it, however, a piercing scream shattered the silence, echoing off the walls like glass breaking in slow motion. "Mommy!" It was Lucy's voice, choked and frantic, sending warmth flooding through her veins even as dread unfurled in her stomach. Sarah's hand froze. A cold realization settled in with that cry. She was not alone in her journey. Whatever was on the other side of the door, it wanted something from her. The shadows rallied, pushing back, muttering in panic, "This isn't what you think." Would she open the door and face the screams of her children? Or would she succumb to the darkness that threatened to swallow her whole? The conflict swirled inside her. It all came down to this moment, teetering on the edge of decision. And all at once, the final question loomed overhead, demanding an answer. Would saving her children lead her to damnation? Fingers trembling, she gripped the handle again, heart pounding like a war drum. What awaited behind that door was a mystery that could be her salvation or her undoing. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself against the crushing weight of silence that hung in the air. The handle felt slick beneath her fingers, and for a moment, time hung in a fragile balance. The plea of her child clawed at her insides. "Mommy!" She turned the knob, and as it swung open, a blinding light enveloped her, pushing back the shadows that swirled just outside. Sarah stumbled into the room, squinting. It felt dreamlike, surreal, the brightness washing over her like an ocean wave. But it was the room's atmosphere that made her skin crawl. The air was thick and sweet, as if draped in cotton candy, warm but suffocating. And there, at the center, was a small table, its surface gleaming under the light. What caught her eye next made her blood run cold. On the table lay a collection of photographs, faded, dog-eared snapshots of children. Smiling faces caught in moments of joy, all around Lucy's age. But the smile didn't reach their eyes. A glazed look stared back at her, empty yet daunting. The realization gnawed at her. Each face bore a faint shadow, figures lurking just behind, their features indistinguishable but undeniably sinister. Sarah's breath hitched as one image caught her eye, a blonde girl with familiar features, a little girl who looked just like Lucy. She reached out, her fingers trembling over the photograph. A pulse raced beneath her fingertips, darker than the shadows that crept along the periphery of her vision. Whatever held these images was alive, feeding off her fear. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her with a force that rattled the walls. The light flickered, casting the room in fits of shadow and illumination, and she felt it, the shift in atmosphere, the way the laughter returned, now clearer and sharper, echoing off the walls. Her memories, the whispers lined the edges of her sanity, taunting her as they swelled into a cacophony. Panic clawed at her throat, and she spun, chest tightening like a vice. "Lucy! Tommy!" she called out desperately. When the laughter halted abruptly, the room plunged into a deafening stillness. Sarah's pulse thudded in her ears as she stepped back, nearly stumbling over the edge of the table. The shadows coalesced, pooling at her feet, creeping upwards, tightening their grasp. Choose or lose them forever. The rasp of shadowy voices chilled her blood. The air thickened, becoming more claustrophobic with each passing heartbeat. "No! I will not lose them!" she screamed, adrenaline pumping through her veins. She needed to escape, to find her kids. But the photographs. They felt like a threshold to something deeper, darker. What were they? How many had come before her? The realization dawned each trip down this nightmarish path could snare one more child into endless despair. Then, just as quickly, a single light in the far corner flickered back on, revealing a door on the opposite wall, one she hadn't noticed before. It was an exit, bathed in a soft, beckoning glow. But would it lead her closer to her children, or farther from them? Heart hammering, she considered her options. Every moment stretched into eternity. Shadows loomed over the photographs, whispering secrets, tales of despair. Would she walk through that door, trusting it wasn't another trap? The room shuddered, a warning in the air that crackled like electricity. Whatever was behind her could easily consume her, just as it had with countless others. She inhaled deeply, each breath giving her a sliver of hope. With urgency swelling within her, Sarah turned towards the glowing door. "Mommy!" The shriek resonated again, slicing through the stillness, reigniting her resolve. In the end, it all came down to this: would stepping through that door bring her face to face with her children's screams, or unleash a darkness that would claim her soul? Sarah hesitated, but then surged forward, her hand gripping the door handle tightly. The wood felt warm under her palm, promising salvation, yet she sensed the shadows ready to strike, desperate to drag her back. Would she dare to open it and plunge headfirst into the unknown? In the split second before she turned the knob, a final question bubbled to the surface: what exactly waited for her on the other side? As Sarah turned the knob, a wave of light burst forth, illuminating the encroaching shadows. It enveloped her, its warmth wrapping around her body like a comforting embrace. She dared to step through the doorway, her heart pounding. The room she entered was starkly different. It felt expansive, almost ethereal, like stepping into another realm. The air was lighter, infused with a strange kind of energy that made her skin tingle. In the center of this new space stood a shimmering orb, pulsating gently as though it contained the very essence of hope. "Lucy! Tommy!" She called out, the words escaping her lips with an instinctual urgency. From the orb emerged a familiar light. Shapes began to take form, wobbly and wavering, but then they solidified into her children, Lucy with her bright smile and Tommy clinging tightly to her leg. "Mommy!" they cried, their voices full of joy mixed with the lingering undertone of terror. They rushed toward her, and the moment was electric. Sarah bent down, wrapping her arms around them, feeling the warmth of their bodies seep through her, grounding her in reality. Tears streamed down her cheeks as panic coursed through her. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" She held them close, hands trembling as the shadows outside clawed at the walls of the ethereal room. She could still feel their malicious presence, still hear their haunting whispers, lingering just out of reach. "Mommy, we were scared," Lucy whimpered, gazing up at her with wide, innocent eyes. "I know," Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But we're going to be all right. I'll protect you." She looked back at the orb, its glow intensifying, illuminating the room like dawn breaking through the night. But the shadows pressed harder now, swirling faster, desperately seeking to pull them back into the darkness. Desperation gripped Sarah's heart, the very substance of the shadows felt alive, hungry for reclamation. "Mommy, we can't stay here," Tommy whimpered, grasping her hand tightly. Sarah's heart raced. "You're right." Time was slipping through her fingers. They had to make a choice, and they had to do it quickly. "We'll use the light." She glanced around, searching for a way out. The orb. It must lead somewhere safe. As she and her children approached it, Sarah felt a surge of courage. There was no room for doubt, not anymore. The shadows snarled, echoes of Reynolds' mocking laughter mixing with the chaos. "You'll never escape, Sarah." They jeered, "Join us or lose them." With her heart pounding, Sarah took a deep breath, a whisper of hope igniting within her, then squeezed her children's hands. "Together!" she cried, and they charged toward the orb. They collided with the light, and it enveloped them, engulfing their forms in a kaleidoscope of color. It felt frantic, exhilarating, like breaking free from underwater. In that wild moment, the shadows recoiled, screeching in agony as they lost their grip. Then, silence descended. They tumbled through, landing softly on solid ground. Sarah blinked, her surroundings shifting back into focus. They were outside, bathed in gentle sunlight, a peaceful park blossoming around them. The shadows faded into nothing, evaporating under the warmth like fog under the sun. "Mommy!" Tommy laughed, breaking the silence and tumbling onto the grass, a joyous giggle that sent warm relief flooding through her veins. Lucy bounced beside him, twirling in delight. "We're back!" she squealed. As Sarah knelt in the grass, her heart swelled. They were safe. The three of them, together again, no shadows lurking, just the laughter of children ringing in the air. She pulled them close, cherishing the moment even as exhaustion washed over her. "We made it," she whispered, wrapping her arms tightly around them. It was a simple truth, but the weight of their escape pressed heavily off her chest. Yet, even in their reunion, a lingering sense of foreboding hovered. The memory of the motel, the darkness that twisted through her mind, it would not disappear. There were still others caught in that web of despair, still waiting for rescue. "Mommy, can we go home?" Lucy's voice broke through her thoughts, a question filled with innocence. "Home it is." But Sarah's voice trailed off, the flicker of determination igniting once more. "I promise, we'll help others too. We'll make sure they're safe. No one deserves to go through what we did." Tommy beamed up at her with unwavering faith, and Lucy nodded, the sun glimmering in her eyes. Together, they would rise against the darkness. With a gentle squeeze, Sarah led her children forward, their laughter echoing under the vast blue sky, leaving behind the shadows for good. This is how heroes are forged, out of love, defiance, and the shared promise to fight for one another. Now, don't leave yet. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button right now to feed the algorithm. And make sure you flood the comments section with your thoughts about this ending, your reactions, and your theories. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this thrilling conclusion. True fans know the power of a community.